Hi folks, Paul Jennings here, and welcome to the PlayCajon Podcast, conversations with drummers and percussionists from around the world. This is episode 2 of the PlayCajon Podcast, so I just wanted to explain a little bit about my thinking of what this is. It's a conversation. The drummers and percussionists that are coming on here are great people. They've got some great stories and a lot of great insight to share with you guys. So I really wanted to keep it in its organic form. I'm not going to use a lot of editing, if any, when it comes to these episodes. I just want to deliver the organic feel of the conversation so you guys can get the most out of it and really enjoy it and get a feel for who these people are. So yeah, I really hope that you guys enjoy what's coming up, because I've got a lot of pretty cool people coming up over the next few weeks on the PlayCajon Podcast. My guest today is drummer percussionist Mark Powers, who has played with loads of people over the years, musicians from the Rolling Stones. He's played with members of Bob Marley and the Wailers, and he's fast becoming one of the foremost names in percussion education. He's written and co-written literally dozens of books for both adults and kids. He's done TEDx talks. He's a life coach. He's a Tycoon Percussion artist, and he's even performed for tribal chiefs in Ghana, West Africa. He has literally traveled the world learning his craft, and he's here today on the PlayCajon Podcast. Hi, Mark. It's great to have you on the PlayCajon Podcast. Thank you for joining me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. It's great to catch up with you again. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I know it's been a wee while since we spoke about things, and I see that there's many things happening in the world of Mark Powers. What's going on with you these days?
I am out in Portland, Oregon, just doing a lot of what we do, doing a lot of performances and some teaching and quite a bit of recording recently. So some percussion stuff, some drum set stuff, just all sorts of things.
That's great, because you're a drummer and a percussionist. Would you say you're equal parts both, or?
I would say 75% of what I do currently is drum set, but the percussion side of things is something I really love, and I'm probably doing more of that in teaching scenarios than I am drum set. And as far as recording sessions and such go, the percussion side of things seems to continually be increasing percentage-wise.
That's cool. Yeah, I've always found that, like, if you get a gig or a studio gig as a drum set player, playing both hand percussion and drum set myself, if people know that you can do percussion as well as drum set, that's always kind of an added bonus as a session player, would you say?
Oh, absolutely. And I have recently done sessions where I was just hired to do one or the other, and then ended up getting roped into doing the opposite. Somebody brought you in because you play percussion and didn't even realize you played drum set. And once you get in there, they realize that you do, and have you lay down some tracks along those lines too. So yeah, it definitely it increases your marketability, I guess. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially they hire a drummer and a percussionist, and then Mark Powers comes in to do percussion, and then the drummer gets fired, and they get two for the price of one.
Yeah, well, I don't know about
no.
No, it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy
totally.
getting to do both of them, and it's a treat no matter what I end up getting to play.
That's cool, man. And so, why don't we tell the listeners a bit about how you began as a drummer percussionist? How did you get into it?
I started off in 5th grade doing the school concert band sort of thing that I guess a lot of people have done over the years, and kicked off with my Remo practice pad and old Ludwig 2B drumsticks, and just did that for a couple of years until I got interested in drum set, and then that changed the direction of where I was going with things. Eventually I was living in the Midwest at the time, and eventually moved down to Minneapolis and studied at a little music school called Music Tech, which you now know as McNally Smith College of Music in St. Paul, Minnesota.
That's right, just down the road from me here.
Yep, it used to be called Music Tech, and it was on 3rd and Washington in Minneapolis, and that's where I went to school many years ago. And then after getting out of there with a very drum set focused study, I ended up getting interested in a lot of world styles, and from there just started taking lessons where I could and traveling to different places, West Africa and such, to study when I could. And that's when the percussion side of things really started becoming a little bigger part of what I did and now do.
So you traveled to a few different countries to study different traditions of percussion, is that right?
Yeah, I had first traveled to Ghana and spent some time staying over there and studying. Then, since then, I've been a variety of places. I've done a number of trips down to Puerto Rico, I've gone to Cuba, and then when I've traveled other places, Southeast Asia, China, Thailand, I always try to make a point of doing some sort of research or study while I'm there, even though sometimes you're kind of racing around from place to place and don't have much time to spend with somebody. I try to make the most of a trip like that and not only be performing, but try to bring some rhythms and new knowledge back with me.
That's fantastic. Can you tell us about is there a specific time or experience that you had on one of these trips that really stands out to you?
Oh man, the way traveling goes, just on its own, much less adding the music studies in there and performance experiences. There's so many, but one of my favorites was just being able to spend several months in Ghana and be able to really get to a place where I could perform a handful of different styles. And honestly, one time kind of being honored there by being able to perform for a paramount chief in the Volta region area who was traveling through, getting to perform with some of the group and play master drum for that paramount chief was a lot of fun. I think that was them showcasing to him that, they were teaching foreigners that were coming over there their styles, but kind of a total honor for me, for them to trust me in that role in front of somebody like that. So little experiences like that, traveling and studying and playing, there are tons of them, but it's always amazing.
So performing master drum for this chief of who was it again, you said?
I was a paramount chief in like the southeast region of Ghana.
And so performing this was that's a rarity, especially for a Westerner.
I would think so. I don't know for sure, but there's a lot to those styles, and so I don't. One of those scenarios where I don't think they would be letting me do it if I was totally sucking it up playing it. So it makes you feel good. That's
so great. That's so cool, man. To get that opportunity to really experience the essence of where where the drum and where the tradition comes from. I mean, that's invaluable.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
And for them, I suppose, did you get the impression for those people that they were happy that Western people like us are picking up the djembe and picking up all of these different African drums and using them? Do you get the impression that they are happy that that their culture is being spread far and wide? I'm sure they do.
Yeah, I think so. And I think at times people are often surprised that someone would travel from a different part of the world to come and study their music. I've gotten that sort of reaction from people a lot, where they just think it's so cool that you would spend the time, energy, and money to come over and hang in their area and really want to dive into their music. Because oftentimes they think where we're at and the musics we're playing and things are super cool as well. So them getting to experience the fact that the opposite is true, somebody thinks that their stuff is awesome, I think is an experience that I've run across several times.
That's great. It's great and inspiring to hear about somebody like yourself that has literally gone, I'm going to learn the djembe, I'm going to learn the congas, and I'm going to go to the places where I guess the best known origins are of that instrument and study. I think that's... How important would you say that was to someone who's just picking up the congas for the first time? Do you think that they should be intending on getting on a plane to Puerto Rico, or what do you think is a good course of action for a beginner at the congas or the djembe or something like that?
That's a tough call, because I think it can really vary for a lot of people. I know a lot of folks who have no desire to do what I and other people similarly do and travel to places like that. I don't think it's a horrible idea to stay right where you're at and find a good teacher and just get into things and then get to a point where you want to go deeper with it. I mean, by all means, if someone were really interested and at the beginning stages wanted to go overseas somewhere to study, they certainly could, and I wouldn't discourage it. But I think for me, one thing I found is people tend to teach a lot differently in different parts of the world. And I don't think that there's any right or wrong way to be teaching or to be learning necessarily. But there are ways that we tend to be familiar with. And I know growing up here and, learning Western musics and, the type of notation and the way that teachers would kind of nurture me through working on new rhythms was extremely different, or has been extremely different than my experiences in a lot of parts of the world where there's maybe an assumption that I know things that I don't because I'm not from around there. Maybe there's a language barrier at times, and a lot of traditional styles are not written down at all. I was a very left-brained visual person going into this, and so it was a real challenge all of a sudden learning things in Ghana that wouldn't be slowed down, that were kind of going at full speed all the time, and be really fast and try to learn things. I would record my lessons, stay up an hour after the sun went down every night by a little lantern light, just trying to transcribe the day's exercises so that the next day I could go back and be able to play this stuff and not be, wasting everybody's time and my money over there. But that sort of approach isn't for everybody.
Yeah.
I had gotten to a point where I just realized that a lot of the musics from parts of the world like that are the things that had come over here to places like New Orleans, and then eventually evolved into all of the popular American music styles that I'd spent my career up to that point playing, all the rock and jazz and things like that. And I did want to go back as close to the root of it as I could, still understanding that things have evolved even over there, like, a ton over tens and hundreds of years.
That's also something that's important to remember is that the culture over there is also developing.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, things have certainly evolved from, whatever they used to be that, you and I will never know. Yeah. But I wanted to go back and get as close to that, those types of roots as I could, rather than studying from a guy like myself here. Yeah. But yeah, to each his own. I think, some people really like the idea of studying from a guy like you or I here that have went somewhere and studied and can kind of filter down all of that information and present it in a way that they're familiar with and comfortable with here.
Yeah, and it's, when you're talking about like the way that people are going to, if you go to a country like Africa or India or wherever to learn a style of music, like the way that they convey the what they're trying to convey to you can be very different. I remember even going to Norway and working with a bunch of Scandinavian musicians for the first time, and there was a rhythm that they were trying to teach me to accompany this song, and to me it sounded like one thing that my brain thought it should be, but their brains were all thinking in a totally different way. Even though it sounded like the same rhythm to me, the feel of it was like totally different to them or something, and it took like a while to kind of get my body and my mind into like being able to feel that particular groove or way that it sat within the rhythm of it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every different musical style and certainly kind of musical culture in different parts of the world, here and otherwise, all have their own feels and their own phrasing, and it is easy for us to we tend to interpret things like the downbeat or the beginning of a phrase based on our own experiences, the musics that we're comfortable with and that we've played and things like that. And you travel to a place where phrases don't start and stop in the same places that we're used to, and it certainly takes a while.
Yeah, that's right. That's totally right on. It's your when your brain is like geared to search for the one or whatever, then it takes you a while to kind of get into that thinking. And it's so interesting that these rhythms from different cultures or scales or whatever like feel so normal to that culture, but to us feel completely alien,
Yeah, well, it's really along the same lines of us traveling and learning a new language.
Yeah.
It really, really is. People kind of make that connection often, but it's very, very true. And once you've listened to that language a ton, once you've practiced the vocabulary, once you've practiced putting letters and words and phrases together enough times, all the repetition, eventually that sounds just as familiar to your ear as your native language. And the same goes with music. Any new style, you start to play around with odd phrases and such, and it takes a long time for it to be something that you're not somehow relating to what you already know. But once you've done it, heard it enough, it becomes familiar enough that it is something you can essentially become fluent in.
That makes a lot of sense, man. Well, cool. I wanted to ask you I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. That was a fantastic insight into your travels, though. But I wanted to ask you, you've done a number of books, including Alfred's Drum Set Method 2. You were one of the authors on that, which is an amazing thing. And you've done a number of all kinds of different books related to drumming and also just like helping people get forward in their careers. But the first book I just wanted to ask you about was Slammin' Simon, this character that you've created who he teaches drums, right?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Slammin' Simon is a little guy that I created, and he kind of writing under the pseudonym Slammin' Simon, he put out his first little drum set guide. It's called Slammin' Simon's Guide to Mastering Your First Rock and Roll Drum Set Beats. And
people can get that on Amazon, right?
Yes, you can get it on Amazon in paperback or Kindle version, and that's a ton of fun. It's this little cartoon character, Simon, and his little pet counterpart, Rudy, short for Rudiment, of course.
Clever.
It reminds you to slow down. And these are little guys that I created to just try to start generating some educational content that was really, really geared towards little kids. Because one problem that I see in a lot of the drum educational books out there is that there are a lot of things written for beginners, I guess, intended for beginners, but you look through them and really the terminology needs to be read by an instructor like you or myself. And again, kind of filtered down for the kid. It's not really, most of these methods out there aren't really talking to the kid. And I really wanted to do something that was along those lines. So I created this character. My girlfriend, Autumn, did the illustrations, and they're fantastic. And there's not a ton of music in every book. It's kind of just like breaking each book down to just focusing in one area and trying to get the students really good at that. And the music notation, all of the notes are far larger. They're about 200% the size that you'd normally see. Kind of a throwback to the old piano books that had large bulbous notes on them. So it's easy for a little kid to read. And those are a lot of fun. That his first book is out, and that was great. It got a lot of support from a number of companies helping launch that. And right now I'm working on a Spanish version of that first book.
Cool.
It should be out very soon. And then I'm just in the beginning stages of working on his next book. That's going to be it's going to be the first of 3 books that are more rudiment focused.
And so the notation, is it essentially sort of the same? I mean, is it sort of regular kind of notation, but in a simpler, bigger form?
Yes.
Just to kind of gear them towards that.
Exactly right. I'm working on a different book that it does not use standard notation for really, really little kids.
Yeah.
But my intent with the Slam and Simon sort of approach is to definitely be teaching what I guess you and I would kind of call standard notation these days, similar to what the drum magazines and Alfred Music and Hal Leonard and everybody else are using.
Yeah.
Because I really want to use that method to start getting kids headed down a road that will allow them to jump into books and magazines and things like that and not have that notation be completely foreign to them.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I see so many different types of notation for hand percussion. I'm sure you've seen it in your time as well. And when I did the Cajon book, they were like, Hal Leonard were like, how do you want to, what kind of notation do you think should be best? And it just made sense to me to put it in on a staff in a regular form, so people who were using that regular notation could make sense of it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that there are, again, lots of different things that work for different people. And with hand drums, you see like the TUBS system, the time unit box system, kind of the box notation people use, and the regular 5-line staff. And I think, whatever works for you is cool. But I really try in my private lessons and then in books like this to steer people a direction so that they can make most use out of the other resources that are out there. Because, I'm hoping some kid who maybe gets into drumming and is inspired by this little Slam and Simon character, I'm hoping this is just one of a million different drum books they eventually check out. And so I don't want to make it more difficult for anybody at any point.
Well, yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Well, I can't wait to see what Slam and Simon comes up with next.
It's going to be great.
So the books are authored by Slam and Simon. It's his thing. He's the guy that's putting it all together.
Totally, yeah. It's fantastic. So he's just kind of like guiding kids through from start to finish.
Lovely, man. And what other books do you have any other books in the pipeline, or just the Slam and Simon stuff at the moment?
I do have a handful of different books right now. As you mentioned, the Alfred's Drum Set Method book 2 just came out back in September, and now that that's out, we're tidying up a few things on a book of mine called Solo in Style that I had actually previously self-published, but it's been reworked a little bit. And that's a collection of 6 drum set solos, each focused on a different style for kind of beginning to intermediate players. And so tidying some things up on that, and then working on a few other things. I'm actually just secured a deal for my first children's book that's not an instructional thing directly at all. It's still percussion related, but it's just a little story of a kid that doesn't have a drum set trying to put things together, basically.
That's cool. I think I saw something you posted on Facebook about that. What's this all about? This is cool.
It's like I said, just a little. It's a toddler's book, so it's one of those little board books that not very many pages or very many words in it at all, but it's the really thick cardboard pages. Toddler could darn near chew on, and so it's just kind of a really cute, fully illustrated book, just this little story about a kid who wants to be a drummer. And so I'm really excited about that. That will probably be out in the fall of next year.
Right.
and that'll be available at regular bookstores and such, which will be great. And then, of course, working on these 2 Slam and Simon things I mentioned, the Spanish version, and then his next book, and a couple of other collaborations, and I think a cajon book as well.
Cool.
With kind of a little different twist than anything I'm seeing out there right now. So,
is that anything that you'd like to talk about, or is that a secret at the moment?
I'm going to leave it a little bit of a secret at the moment. But I will for sure spend some time talking about this with, because
Cool.
I love your Hal Leonard book, and you've really just like written one of the best methods for somebody wanting to get into that. And I'm certainly not going to even approach trying to rewrite anything that you've already got out there, because it's super, super awesome. But
Man,
yeah,
thank you. That actually, like, that made me sort of tear up with excitement that you said that, because it's been getting some good reviews, but to have someone like yourself who is, you've written a lot of great books over the years, so thank you. That means a lot to me.
oh, absolutely, man! I can't wait to see your djembe one. I think it's going to be fantastic, and I love that you've gotten into the whole publishing realm as well. I think it's a great thing to do as an educator, and but yeah, you've written a great book, and definitely a different twist on this cajon one that I'm looking at, and really want to feature a lot of different ways that a lot of different people out there are using the instrument. So
that's really cool. Sorry.
No, you and I will definitely be doing some talking about it.
Yeah, for sure, man. I look forward to it. I think that's really cool, because what I was basically putting out was something that would introduce new people to the instrument, to many different possibilities, obviously the basics and stuff, but a lot of different stuff in there. But there are so many people coming from different angles with the cajon that are using it in such different ways that it's important to recognize that as well.
Oh yeah, all the time I'm out and about, and just last night I was playing a show in town here, and one of the opening acts had a cajon player that I had to hit up after his set, because he was really creative in the way he was playing it. Some was just a slight bit different, and so I love seeing different approaches people take. But a book like you put out is so valuable, because it kind of goes back to something that the late Elliot Fine had told me. He and Wilfredo Reyes and Dave Stanek and I got to collaborate on a book called The 2-in-1 Drummer a couple of years ago.
Yes, fantastic thing that is. Wow.
Yeah, that was just an absolute honor to be involved with that. And before we'd gotten to do that, Elliot and I had chatted several times just about some of my travels and studies, and he would bug me, wanting me to send him notation, kind of transcriptions of these West African rhythms and things. And he encouraged me to release some of that stuff. He really wanted to, see me put it in book form and put it out. But he was very adamant about also stressing the fact that, while he and a small group of people, like, again, you and I perhaps would have some interest in that, from an education and like marketing standpoint, like the niche for that and the level of interest is actually very small. There's just a few of us that are interested in, extended advanced techniques on an instrument, or right. Things like that. But there will always be not only a market, but just a need for, how to get started playing Cajon 101. Because
the basics, yeah.
There's a brand new, student going over to the music store, picking an instrument up and coming back and looking online and trying to figure out where to start with this thing. And things change, and so it's the reason that Modern Drummer magazine still has basic rock drum set groove articles in there, even though they've already covered those topics like 30 years ago.
Of course. That's totally it, man. People are always, I find that most of the people that come to my website or anything like that or are getting in touch with me, they want to find the basics. They want to learn how to use the instrument. And to be honest, then they want to kind of go off on their own journeys. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that sometimes it's easy for people to get bogged down by like, what is the correct way? What's the path I should be doing? And really, for me, I've always said, your own path is the right one for you. I always kind of say, learn the right techniques to play the drum, but then, go on the path that's right for you.
Absolutely. I was just did coffee yesterday morning with a couple of drummer buddies that we get together on a regular basis, and that exact topic came up. Just the idea that, all three of us are serious about wanting to learn, quote unquote, right technique and try to hone rudiments and, get our chops together. But at the same time, we were all agreeing that in some ways, none of that matters at all, because we all know players who don't have any sort of, legit education. You watch them play, and most of us would feel that they have the worst technique in the world, but they sound amazing. They've got other things. They've got feel. They've found their own ways to develop speed, or whatever. Technique is, I think, something that's great to study, and it's a great avenue to go down that can give you a lot of great tools, but it's not the only way. Like, that shouldn't be a barrier for somebody just getting into an instrument and going for it.
That's right. And it's finding what your strengths are. I remember as a drum set player, I know for like almost my entire 20s, I was like so kind of hooked on the fact that I was going to learn all these crazy gospel fills and all this wild stuff, and it took me like my entire 20s to come out of that and realize, actually, I'm not really very good at that. Like, my strength is definitely, and without sounding like I'm Steve Jordan or anything, but my strength, I think, is I'm a groover. I like playing beats. Do you know what I mean? And I was like, and as soon as I realized, whoa, that's what resonates with me, then I just started going in that direction and trying to get better at playing grooves and feel and learning different grooves and learning how to play them in different ways. And I was like, whoa, that makes me so much happier than trying to pursue this avenue that just wasn't really that natural for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and no matter which avenue you choose, you've got plenty of work cut out for you. Because you can go, and not that these are cut and dry different approaches, but if you could really focus on the hardcore chops route and be working forever on developing more speed and more patterns, blah blah blah. But you could totally turn your head to that and focus down the road, just wanting to focus on feel, and still have a lifetime of work ahead of you just to try to make everything you're playing feel good and make it feel better, and get better at time and being ahead and behind the beat and these things. I still struggle in every single one of those areas we're talking about. It's a constant challenge.
Yeah, it's like you listen to some players and you're like, how is he playing like that far behind the beat, but it feels like it's just enough, and yet I can only play on the beat. It's like it's so frustrating sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. I just this has been a great chat, Mark. It really has. Like, this has gone in a great direction. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you a ton for having me on, and congrats getting your new podcast started up here.
Well,
this is awesome.
Yeah, thank you, man. Do you have any? I know that you do like career coaching and stuff, and you've written what was your book? Self-Promotion Sucks.
I was one of, I think, 40 authors in that book. We each contributed different little sections and chapters, and that was a lot of fun.
That sounds like a fun thing. And so I wanted to ask you specifically if there, I always ask this, or I'm going to always ask this because I think it's important. What advice, if any, comes to mind to a new player, to people like getting into music, getting into anything, starting a new journey with a passion that they have?
Just general advice.
Yeah, just general, like what are the things that you think people need to think about?
Yeah, I honestly, I think that absorbing and, adopting as much as possible is always a good thing. I'm a big fan of stealing when it comes to rhythms, business ideas, whatever. I mean, I really am a big fan of this idea of repurposing that someone had first introduced me to on the writing side of things, kind of on the journalism side, and taking an article that you've written and rework all of it and pitch it to a different magazine, in a different industry or something like that. And when my friend Sarah had introduced me that idea in the writing world, I started taking it and kind of looking at it in the rest of my world and realizing that I could take a cool idea I see something like you do, or someone like you do, and find a way to twist it around, kind of make it my own, and utilize it in my own way. And I started doing that a lot. When I see people do things online, a blogger would be, using some sort of technique on a site to get an email address or something. I would immediately just say, like, how could a drummer use this? And find a way to twist it around and use it in my world. And most of the time, those tend to be the sorts of things that I do that people tend to think are extremely creative and, fresh and original, where really it's something I've just stolen from someone who's maybe in an industry not even closely related to ours, and just found a way to integrate it into our whole world. And so musically, I think if somebody's getting into music, just listening to as many people as you possibly can. And I don't think the goal is ever to sound just like someone, but try to, just for the sake of learning, their feel or those licks that they play, or replicating their drum sound, trying to go for a Steve Gadd drum set tone, and learn what it is that he had to do to get those types of sounds. And so, I think just keeping your ears open and stealing until kind of like we were talking about earlier, like you've learned that language and you can use all of those phrases that you've learned and just be able to talk, saying what you want to say, kind of like develop your original style.
Oh my God, I could not agree more, man. I think that's fantastic advice for anybody. So, Mark, thank you so much again, man. It really has been a pleasure having you on the podcast. Powerspercussion.com, is that right?
That's it, Powers Percussion.
And there you will find everything you could possibly need if you are interested in drums, percussion, or furthering your life.
Thanks a ton for having me on here, man.
No worries, man. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening to the PlayCajon podcast. That was Mark Powers. Make sure you check him out at powerspercussion.com. He's on Facebook at Powers Drums, and he's on Twitter and Instagram at Mark Powers. Make sure you also check out all the future episodes of the PlayCajon podcast. You can do that at playcajon.org, and you can also subscribe to this on iTunes. Just go to the search and type in PlayCajon, and then what should come up is a big blue icon or a little blue icon with a cajon in the middle with wearing headphones, and that's me. Then you can hit the subscribe button and you can hear all of the future episodes of the PlayCajon podcast. Thanks again, and till next time, take care.